Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you all had a great week. I had a great week. Thank you. I was looking back at the video I did with Lindsay, and I'd like to thank Lindsay for doing that because she was so open and raw and real, and it made me reflect on what was going on with me during that time. So I thought I would just give a little perspective. Lindsay talked about when she noticed that things changed in our family, and that was when Ben was in grade 9. And when I look back, when Ben was in grade 9, that's when I noticed his behavior was changing, and that's when he was smoking laced weed. Lindsay asked what it was laced with, and I spoke to Ben, and one of the things that it was laced with was heroin. He said anything that would get him higher. So things started. And so my perspective on what happened with me during that time, besides losing it, and I mean, literally, I lost it. I used to yell, I used to scream. I just didn't know that this was what this path was going to lead us to. And that was the beginning of Ben's addiction. So I just looked back and I thought I'd share with you what was going on. So he was in grade 9. He was skipping school. He did have an IEP, and he had a teacher that was involved and tried to help him. And he skipped so much school. He went through suspensions at school. At one point, he was suspended for, oh my gosh, I want to say at least a couple of weeks or more, and I had to drive him to another school during those 2 weeks during the suspension, and he even skipped there. I would have to walk him into the classroom because I would literally drop him off. This was in another community. Drop him off, leave. I'd get a call that he wasn't there. So I would have to drive him, walk him into his classroom, make sure he went. His personality changed. He became really angry and violent, and there were holes in the wall. And during that time, I tried to get him into a psychiatrist. He was on a waiting list for a psychiatrist. I remember bringing him to the doctor to get the referral and being in a waiting room, and Ben was also going through suicidal thoughts. He would be banging on the wall. This is in a waiting room of a doctor's office, and he'd be like, I'm going to kill myself, and it'll be your effing fault. And I remember just sitting there, not saying anything, because it's like, oh my gosh, does anybody hear what's going on here? And so we got him on a waiting list for a psychiatrist, but meanwhile, I had to continue dealing with what was going on in the house. With the suspensions and everything. And during this time, my mom was ill. She was diagnosed with brain cancer, and she was dying. They gave her only 3 months, but yay, she lived for 10 months. So that was great. But because she didn't live in the area, I would drive home. Home is St. Catharines at the time. And I would go visit my mom, and every week, and Ben would be doing his drugs, skipping class. I would leave for the day, and I don't know what I would run into when I'd get home. I remember one home driving into my driveway, and this beautiful tree I had in the front lawn was totally demolished. And that's what happened while I was gone. So, I'm just trying to give you a picture of, Lindsay was living with us. She started her first year of school, and that's when she started to stay at her aunt's house, and I don't blame her one bit. So I'm just looking at my list. It was crazy, and he would threaten to kill himself, and what helped me get through a lot of that was a crisis line that I would talk to almost every day, and I would talk to them and tell them what was going on, and she encouraged me to call the police if he starts to threaten to kill himself. So I knew that this one day he wanted money, and I wasn't going to give him money, and I'm driving home talking to I actually pulled over and talked to the crisis worker, and I said, I know he's just going to go ballistic. And thankfully she was there for me, because when I got home he went ballistic, and I basically called 911. and he took off, and they did end up finding him. But it's interesting how he already knew the system. And the police officer was wonderful. He came back to talk to me, and he said he was just mad at me and that there was nothing more they can do. But the good thing about me calling the police that day was that I used that, because one thing, I would follow through on anything that I would say with Ben. And this is part of teaching someone how to treat you. I taught him that you mess with me, this isn't acceptable, and this is what I'm going to do. So that's the holes in the wall wasn't as extreme after that, because as soon as he'd get angry and he'd lift his fist to punch a hole or damage something, I'd say, you go ahead and do that. I'd have my phone right there ready to call 911. Because I said, you do that, I'm going to have them charge you for damaging my property. So during this time, we're on the waiting list for a psychiatrist. My mom is ill. I'm leaving every week to go visit her. It was pretty chaotic. I think it was during that time that I even took a little bit of a stress leave from work, because I was just dealing with so much. And while I was on leave, I went to a counselor at least a couple times a week to help get my sanity back, to help get my mental health in check. And we finally, during that time, at the end of the school year, maybe, we finally got to a psychiatrist, and, we had a couple appointments with him, and then he suggested we get him out of the environment. So that's when Ben moved to his dad's place. And once Ben moved to his dad's place, the psychiatrist then said, well, I'm sorry, I can't see him anymore. I'm like, what? What do you mean you can't see him anymore? We were on a waiting list for a year to get in. We have a couple of appointments, and then we listen to his advice, and then he drops us like a hot potato. This was the beginning of our broken health system. And I'm not going to get into detail there, but Ben moved into the Peel region. We got him to a psychiatrist, and this is when we discovered that as parents, we didn't have any parental rights when it came to his mental health, because the psychiatrist that did see him, after the appointment said, so Ben, do you want to see me? And he's like, no effing way. And she says, well, I can't help him then if he doesn't want to see me. And it's like, are you kidding me? This is like a 14, 15-year-old kid that has issues, that needs help, and you're saying you can't help him because he doesn't want to come. So this was the beginning of our journey, let's say 8 years ago. And it was crazy for a number of years. So I'm just sharing this because Lindsay was sharing what she was going through during that time. How did things change? Well, once I started to go to counseling, realize that, I don't have control over what he does, I started to educate myself and what was going on. At this point, we still didn't know that he was an addict. We just thought that his mental health issue had escalated because of the drugs he was doing. And at the time, remember, we didn't know that the drugs were laced. So we were just trying to keep him alive and get him on a path, get him to go to school. We enrolled him in another school, which was going well, but then he started skipping. So what did I do to help myself? I educated myself. I took care of my mental health. And that was the best thing I did, because this was the beginning of our journey. From there, it just escalated and went forward. Now, setting boundaries, I started those when he was living with me. And one of those boundaries was no money. I wasn't giving him money. And another one was to have that cell phone with me ready to call the police, and not accept the way he was behaving. Although it was really challenging because he was already 6 feet tall and he towered over me. So, I just had to stand my ground. So I just wanted to share with you you know what Lindsay went through if you've watched Family Matters Part 1 and Part 2. And that's what I was going through at that time. So addiction affects the whole family. It affects extended family. We couldn't go to family events. And if we did, if Ben was drinking or doing whatever, it would get out of hand. So that was many years ago. We are in a better place today. Yay. I'm waiting for the last week of August so that I can celebrate that Ben has not been in a hospital for a year. What? A year? Yay. So that's my story. I wish you guys all a great week. I pray that you're taking care of yourself. Take care of your mental health. When your mental health is good, you're able to help others. I wish you all a fantastic week. Sending you lots of love. Take care. And thanks for watching. See you next week.